All right, I will call the July 12th, 2021 school board meeting to order. It is 7 p.m. We are in conference room C of the Fisher Building at 12121 West North Avenue. Ms. Newman, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Fraley?
Absent.
I think someone's got their mic on that's logged into Zoom.
Dr. Jessup Banger?
I think you just want your volume off.
Okay, whoever did something then, I think it worked.
Sorry, Mary.
Present.
Mr. Meyer?
Learning all the things that we had learned last year.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're good now.
All right, Mr. Meyer's absent.
Ms. Neufeld? Here. Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Rowland?
Here.
Mr. Doman?
Here, thank you. Next, we'll move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. The board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinions and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider this input in decision-making. The board requests that individuals limit their comment on each item to 3 minutes. Following any comment, an individual board member may respond on the issue raised. However, it is not the intent of the public comment portion of the agenda for the board to enter into a debate with members of the community. Because non-agenda items are not publicly posted in advance, no action will be taken on public comment regarding non-agenda items. Are there any public comment in the room? We'll start there on non-agenda items. State your name and address and 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Doman, and welcome to you, Dr. Means. My name is Deb Falk-Palak, 7435 West Wells Street. July 26, 1990. This is the date that the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law. The ADA is an extremely important civil rights law that works to ensure all people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. This month, our nation will celebrate the 31st anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think back to the time when our community was contemplating a referendum to build new schools. The community responded to the survey the district distributed with showing ADA access as the number 2 priority item for the district. The community responded and disability access would be open through the referendum goals for students, parents, guests, visitors, and staff. Ironically, the district has been operating and renting an apartment for essential programming for high school students with disabilities and transition age youth with disabilities in an inaccessible location for far too long, with stairs to get into it and no ramping or elevator access. I think how it took nearly 2 years after a student injured themselves falling down the steps to install a railing for basic safety for the students with disabilities and others to negotiate these steps. Just recently, the very exciting news was announced that the district will be providing programming for these students in a new apartment location. I have to believe this apartment will open access for all students, parents, and staff who have disabilities. I wish to thank Mr. Sean Rowland and Mr. Mike Meyer for listening to those both within the Wauwatosa community and outside of the Wauwatosa community who had concerns that our district was operating programming for students with disabilities in an inaccessible location. I am 100% convinced that without the actions of these 2 school board members, this barrier to access may still be continuing today. This too is another example of how should we follow those districts who are leaders in convening disability committees to work together to address such things as safety with installation of a hand railing in less than 2 years and a review of physical access to all programming offered through the Wauwatosa School District. I would love to see the board ask administration to agenda an item to learn more about what actually happens in this apartment, particularly as there's a new program to begin this fall of this upcoming school year. I have seen other new programs being discussed at school board meetings, and I would hope that programming for our students with disabilities could also be discussed. There's still work to be done, both within our nation and certainly within our school district to elevate opportunity for those with disabilities. Thank you again, Mr. Rowland. Thank you, Mr. Meyer, for your actions for those with disabilities. Mr. Dauman, an added statement. I believe you. I believe the messages that we have exchanged, that you will be part of helping with this too, as well as Dr. Means. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other comment from in the room on non-agenda items?
Mary Jo Randall, 727 North 59th Street. I'm not going to repeat all of the questions and points that I've shared with the board in my emails, but just a couple of things to add and to emphasize for the public, for the community. Bottom line, so why Avid district-wide for Wauwatosa? How did a $170,539 proposal suddenly appear on February 8th, 2021 with a recommendation to approve a contract tacked onto the end of an informational PowerPoint? A contract that had been signed prior to the required approval by the board and without required competitive bidding in violation of purchasing policy 6320. None of this is in accordance with what Wauwatosa has adopted in furtherance of successful outcomes for students, and all of this represents irresponsible management of fiscal resources. Somebody has to know something about the origin and the lack of transparency of this proposal. So what's next? The teaching and learning department needs to seek a remedy that will provide students with the resources they deserve and need. Should be a remedy that will also negate the financial effects, particularly in light of the budget constraints you have. Up to this point, neither the board or the assistant superintendent of teaching and learning have done or said anything to show that they understand why board policies exist in relationship with successful student learning and their distinct roles in ensuring that they work and are adhered to. Here's an opportunity for you to think about. In 2016, the Discovery Ed Science program was purchased by the district. Even after following the policy guidelines for implementation and choosing it, it turned out to be a program that the teachers quickly realized would not work. The then director of teaching and learning expended significant time and effort in negotiating a $90,000 refund for that program. Marta, maybe you can find that transaction in the financial records at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further comment from in the room? Jamie, anyone online?
We have one attendee, but no hands raised.
And we will move on to our next item, which is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for separate discussion and action? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any board discussion on the consent agenda items? Any community comment on the consent agenda items?
There are no hands raised virtually.
Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes.
Ms. Neufeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Doman.
Yes. Human resources action items, administrative contract. Dr. Jessup Banger, can I bother you to read this one since Mr. Meyer is not with us this evening as planned?
It is recommended that the school board approve the administrative contract of Adam Bold, Associate Principal, West High School. The contract is in the amount of $82,000 for a full-time salary of 221 days worked in 2021, 2022, and I so move.
Second.
Thank you. Any board discussion on this item? We have Mr. Bold here with us this evening. If you want to step forward, please, by all means.
Hi, I'm Adam Bold. I'm really excited about the opportunity. I received my degree from Wisconsin Lutheran College last May in innovation and educational leadership, and was able to serve as a summer school principal through this with the Center for Urban Teaching in that program, where I really started to grow and develop who I wanted to be as a leader. And then this previous school year, I had the opportunity to serve at Longfellow and Whitman Middle School as the instructional equity coach, which really helped me see all the amazing things that were happening in the Wauwatosa School District. So I'm just really excited to continue the opportunity and help lead the district forward as the associate principal at West High School.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome.
Any community comment on this item?
There are no hands raised.
Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes.
Ms. Newfeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Doman.
Yes. Welcome, Mr. Bull. I'm glad to have you. Next action item, administrative comment. Mr. Phillips.
Sure. It is recommended that the school board approve the administrative contract of Michael Brock, Associate Principal, Whitman Middle School. The contract is the amount of $83,640 for a full-time salary of 221 days worked in 2021-22, and I so move.
I second.
Thank you. Mr. Brock is obviously someone well-known to this group. He is moving from interim status to permanent. Any other comments from the board? Any public comment on this item?
No hands raised.
Please call the roll.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes.
Ms. Newfeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Doman.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to superintendent update. I've just kind of asked Dr. Means to kind of give us what he's been working on the last couple of weeks. I think he's been, I don't know, not busy at all. No, I imagine he's been quite some time, and he shared with me some of the things he's been doing. So I just thought it was good for us to kind of hear the status of how things have gone and any thoughts he would like to share. I didn't give him any specific topics, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, board members and community members. It's been a busy few days, but exciting. I think many of you know that I worked here a few years ago when I was much younger and didn't have a lot of gray hair, and it's been humbling to know that I have an opportunity to serve this community again. To connect with familiar faces has been really helpful to me, and has grounded me to understand that there's a rich tradition here of just serving our kids. And so it's with a humble heart that I come to you and share with you that I've started the first process, the first phase of getting to know the district by meeting with principals and assistant principals and other administrators. Mary can attest to the fact that it's been a busy office of just listening to those leaders. But eventually we will start fanning out into the community. In fact, this week I will be at Tulsa tonight, just connecting with the community. Have an opportunity to serve as a judge at the swim and dive on Friday. So I'm looking forward to that as well, along with some other activities in the community. We will also have our first medical advisory council meeting this Wednesday. So the fact that the CDC has issued updated recommendations on how to re-enter for the new school year has made the first few days on the job very interesting. And so we'll engage and listen to many stakeholders as we really try to manage that issue. I don't want to take the thunder from the legislative committee, but the fact that the state budget was signed a few days ago has made things interesting as well. And we're still trying to, and we will figure out in the next few days, what does this mean for Walla Tulsa? I am encouraged that we have legislators and community members that upon the signing of that budget wanted to know, what do we do now? What's our next move? And in a lot of communities, it would have been the sign of, well, we're done and we're going to move on. Not in Walla Tulsa. It was more of we need information from the school district so we can continue to advocate for our children. And so I'm working with my colleagues, our assistant superintendents to get real numbers and to make sure that we are communicating with the board and with our legislators and ultimately the community to arm everyone with accurate information so we can continue the fight. The fact of the matter is our kids, and this is something I did share with the board, our kids are coming out of a pandemic of great proportions. And I think it's unacceptable for anyone to assume that our ESSER funds, which are supposed to help our kids recover from this pandemic, to go towards closing our shortfall. And that's been some of the rhetoric that we've been hearing from legislators. That's not what those funds are supposed to go towards. They're supposed to go towards kids and to help our kids get back into school and to get back into the groove of being in a school setting. So I'm looking forward to continuing to take the lead from our legislative committee and our board members and community members to advocate for our students. Speaking of ESSER funds, in the month of August, we will be engaging the community around what they believe we should use those funds for. We have an obligation to engage the community, and we will do so by going out and engaging and asking questions of the community. It's not the typical we receive federal funds and then we use them. We will engage the community in terms of what they think we should use the funds for, and then ultimately bring those recommendations and the feedback to the board. And obviously we want you to have a robust conversation as well as board members. And then finally, I will start my listening session in the month of August as well. I think it's really important to listen. My grandfather, who was a former construction worker and lifelong Milwaukeean, used to always tell me you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and so you should listen more than you ever talk. And I think that goes double for superintendents who are coming into communities. And so it's my intent to go through a very rich process that will be strategic. We're going to gather data. I think it will be a precursor to a strategic planning process where we're going to ask questions around what does the community want to see for our school district. We're going to engage students. I am really looking forward to this process. We're going to really be inclusive in terms of how we reach out to the community and where we go during this process. So there's a lot happening. I'm thankful that this is not my first superintendency. I think with the CDC stuff and the budget things and other things that have been swirling in the last 12 days, it's been fun. I haven't been overwhelmed. It's actually been very rejuvenating and fun. And I'm thankful that I'm working with a group of educators who allow me to ask questions, because I've been asking a lot of questions. I think through questions you learn a lot. So it's been fun. It's going to continue to be fun, and you will continue to see more activities. I'm working with our communications department to make sure that there's a menu of activities that people will know where I am and have an opportunity to engage. So it won't be a situation where it's find Waldo, but you can find or track the superintendent, if you will, with this website that we'll put up in the next week or so, where we'll have a list of the activities and engagements.
Fantastic. Thank you. I know it's been a whirlwind of a start here, so I appreciate it. I know
It's been fun.
Incredibly responsive to board members and community members who've already reached out. So I think we're off to a great start. Any board comments? Ms. Mufeld.
Thank you. Yes, we could put a tile in your pocket, Dr. Meeks.
And you're judging, not participating in the diving contest on Friday?
I'm judging. Yes.
Okay. You're judging with my daughter as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say how much I appreciated the the communication and how we prepared the FAQ for this topic that came up with the CRT and the Project 1619. I thought that was a very good process to use, and I'm hopeful that in the future, other topics that come up that will also be going down that path to share the information, work on it through administration, share the information with the board and the community, and then post it for those who need to catch up and at what time frame they can catch up. So whether or not we agree, whether or not we act on it, just knowing where we are at a certain point of time with these topics that are of interest in the community, I think is really important. So thank you for leading that.
Well said. Thank you. Any other board member comments?
It was fun watching you engage at the parade, and very clear how many people wanted the ear of the superintendent. At one point, I turned to Sean. I said, I think we lost Dr. Means, possibly 2 or 3 miles back. But thanks for taking the time to connect with so many folks, to continue doing that. It's an important, I think, part of this role, and I appreciate you making that immediate effort right away.
Great, thank you. So we should plan for record turnout at Toast It Together, it sounds like on Wednesday. Moving on, Legislative Advocacy Committee update, Dr. Jessica Banger.
And Mr. Rowland, Dr. Means, if you've got other items that you want to kind of, both of you have been really kind of either previously engaged as a co-chair of this group or certainly superintendent really involved. So to do kind of a reset for those watching in person or in the community, Governor Evers put forward a budget several months ago that was going to put additional resources into K-12 and higher education and really kind of focused a lot of resources there. I think we were feeling hopeful that the state budget would ultimately go that way. In the interim, there was a 4.5 billion, is that number right? Real recognition of additional funds that were available. And those funds could have really gone anywhere. Budgets are often kind of referred to as moral documents of what are your priorities and values and morals as a state. Those funds ultimately, through the legislative process, Joint Finance Committee, which is a subset of the legislature, and then ultimately to the full Senate and Assembly, did not invest in K-12 or higher education. We were generally expecting probably at minimum a $200 increase on a per student basis increase in revenue cap. What that ultimately means is that's $200 extra per student that the district could utilize for education. Mr. Rowland, in doing, I think, a beautiful description of this, what the legislature is ultimately articulating right now is that they have invested more than any other maybe legislature in education. But that money isn't actually going into schools. It's going into property tax relief. Certainly, that is a value and a priority, and I would guess most homeowners will appreciate that. Schools, on the other hand, coming out of the pandemic, would greatly benefit from some of those resources, not certainly all, but some of the $4.5 billion that is expected in additional state revenues. So what we have done a lot of work on is working with our elected state representatives. And Wauwatosa, we have a unique situation because we've got 4. We have we're, I would guess, one of the very few purple municipalities in the state of Wisconsin where we've got both Republican and Democratic legislators. And kind of work with them to really articulate what's the Wauwatosa story, what are the things that we would like to do with these resources, anywhere from investing within the classroom, different programs, mental health issues and resources. And ultimately, I think what the takeaway was is that there just wasn't enough, and the legislature is really controlled by the majority, which is the Republican Party right now. There wasn't an appetite to invest in education. So My big thank you would be to Robin Vining, who's one of the legislators for TOSA, who has really been a big champion of public schools in TOSA and across Wisconsin. And we'll continue to hopefully be able to work with each of our other legislators. Lakeisha Myers, who's been a big proponent and supporter. Dale Kuyenga, hopefully we can continue to find ways to work with and to advocate in different ways. And then Sarah Rodriguez, who's our most recently elected legislature, who covers a little bit of Wauwatosa as well. So it's there's some certainly resources that we're appreciative for that will go to K-12 education. But in essence, our budget situation, which is challenging, was exacerbated by the lack of investment in the legislature in our kind of financial budget coming from the state. So that's kind of where we're at. We'd be happy to answer any questions. There's been a lot of, I know, briefings that have come out that have come from various different groups that I'm guessing many folks on the board have reviewed and examined. But that's kind of my read of the situation, and hope to continue to find creative ways. And my hope is that the legislature will continue to, they've got additional resources that are there set aside. And I think in the 11th hour, Governor Evers also then put forward, I think, $100 million that won't close the gap, but will provide some relief in terms of K-12 educational funding. Mr. Rollander, Dr. Means, anything where I didn't quite get it, or?
No, I think the only thing is we don't know how much of the 100 million will come to Wauwatosa. Yeah, we don't know what algorithm they're going to use in terms of per pupil, or is it going to be latched to something else? So that's yet to be determined. And yeah, to Dr. Spanger's point, there's another, I think, 500 some million that's just sort of sitting there at the state, thanks to the good economic situation that there is today. That could be allocated to other things, including K-12 education. So I think that's where Dr. Means was talking about with let's continue to tell our story. It's still very important. It's important to tell the families here in Wauwatosa about our financial situation and to help them understand. It's not an easy thing to understand, so it takes time and patience. But it's something that people have to understand, so people know that it's not mismanagement on our end, that it's part of a process that involves partners with the state, and then with the state not being, not being a good partner to Wauwatosa in this process, that puts us in a difficult position. A $0 per pupil increase with growing expenses creates, a budget challenge. I think that at least is easy for anybody to understand. If you have rising costs and you have a $0 per pupil increase, you can just imagine that creates a problem for any school district, Wauwatosa included.
Thank you. Any other board comments on this item? Any public community comment on either of the superintendent reports?
There are no hands raised.
Thank you, Jamie. Moving on to final public comment on non-agenda items. Is there any further public comment on non-agenda items?
Guess what? I have an idea and a suggestion. And it's regarding the course guide that the district puts together. And I'm really hopeful that this suggestion could be implemented for the 2021-22 school year in the course guide. Just this school year, I had a phone call with a special ed teacher and a building administrator at our school. I asked if I could get a course description or syllabus for a class that is only available for students with disabilities. The building administrator said to me, "I'm curious, why would you want to know that?" Honestly, it was a bit belittling to be asked that question. It wasn't done meanly, in a mean spirit, but I started to wonder, do we have stereotypes or biases about kids with disabilities or parents? Would the same question be asked to a parent calling to say, could I get a course description about Calculus AB or ABSE? The issue is nowhere in the course guide that the district develops is there any description of classes that are only open for students with disabilities to take. These are not even described with one sentence, nor is there any acknowledgement that they even exist in the course guide. Why can't they be described in the course guide? Why can't parents of students with disabilities have the same equal opportunity as parents of students without disabilities in seeing courses offered that their students could take and descriptions of those courses? I can assure you that parents of students with disabilities do want to know all the opportunities and options available for their students. I'm asking and suggesting that we take a look at this and be able to list all of these courses that these kids can take and at least have some acknowledgement in the course guide that they exist so that everybody feels welcome and that has equal opportunity to see what's available for their children. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on non-agenda items?
There are no hands raised.
Thank you, Jamie. May I have a motion to adjourn into executive closed session per Wisconsin statute 19.851E for discussion on negotiations with Wauwatosa Education Association?
So moved.
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Ms. Newman, please call the roll.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes.
Ms. Mufeld,
Yes.
Mr. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Doman.
Yes, we are in closed session. Are we okay starting right away?